Are you ready to say goodbye to the constant ups and downs of the artist income roller coaster? Whether you're a full-time artist who wants to increase and stabilize your income, a part-time musician who wants to go full-time, or a hobbyist who needs to fund your passion projects, this podcast will equip you with the tools, resources, and inspiration to make it happen. My name is Bree Noble. I'm a musician, best-selling author, and educator whose mission is to help musicians like you to increase the income you're already making and tap into new income streams so you can create a more diverse, stable, reliable income from music and finally ditch the starving artist mentality. Now let's dive into the Profitable Musician Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. This is Bree Noble, and I'm excited to be here with Linda Ugelow. She is a speaking confidence and vocal coach, and we're going to talk about all the things that we have to deal with when we're on stage. And it's not even on stage, right? It's like places like this, talking at a podcast, being on a live stream, even just maybe going and trying to book yourself in person with someone or calling someone up, like that speaking confidence, but especially around being able to talk on stage, being able to use stories and just feel confident doing that. And as well, she has a background in music, so we'll talk about that as well. But before we get into all that, Linda, I'd just love to have you tell people a little bit about your background, your story, and so people can know kind of where you're coming from.
I started out as a dance therapist, and so dance was my background, but I realized that at some point I wanted to sing some songs, and I realized I didn't know any songs from beginning to end, so I started to take singing lessons. And the person I started to take lessons with was forming a women's world music group, and she just invited me to join in. So that was back in 1980, and I noticed over the years that I was in the group that there were certain people on stage in our group who loved to introduce songs. And then there were certain of us who hated to have to introduce a song. I was in the latter group, but our director insisted that everybody have a spot in the program because she thought it was really important for the audience to get that kind of visceral feeling, sound like, what do we sound like when we speak? I did not agree. I thought it was it was the bane of my existence. And because I was a dancer in the group and I often had costume changes for the pieces that I would come out in front of the quote unquote musicians and dance, I would often plead, I don't have time, I can't do this, I have this costume change. So that was the first realization that I had a problem speaking. Fast forward, I was in graduate school studying something called authentic movement. My advisor said, Linda, you got to talk to the department about this wonderful process that you've been studying. I was very flattered. I thought I was going to be speaking to the other students in the department, and it turned out it was all the department heads. And as they came in, I heard you talk about this, Bree, on one of your podcasts. You opened your mouth to sing the Messiah, maybe it wasn't the Messiah, but
it was the Messiah, and nothing came out. Yeah,
and nothing came out. That's exactly what happened to me. I opened my mouth and nothing came out, and I closed my mouth and I opened it, and it was like I was in Groundhog Day in hell. And it was back in 92. Nobody thought to carry water around with them. So finally, somebody noticed that I was having an issue and brought me some water. So I did get back my speaking voice, but I never recovered from that emotionally. And I swore I'd never speak in public again. And that's how it was for about 10 years. Well, fast forward, I became an online coach in 2013, 14. And I realized that, well, if I'm going to coach, I need to let people know I'm doing that so I can, coach people. You got to put out your shingle. I started to take video classes because that's how I thought I would reach people. It was super awkward. I felt very uncomfortable. I think I posted on YouTube Unlisted, about 100 videos. And then my video mentor said, there's this amazing new app that you've got to get on. You'll be an early adopter. It'll be so good. It's called live streaming, this technology, and the app is called Periscope. So I got on Periscope. I thought, okay, I'm going to do this. Oh, the caveat was you got to do it daily. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do this. They didn't tell you how terrifying it was because there was no algorithm. Just imagine this. There would be a map on your phone, and so I'm in Boston. If I put my title and say I'm going to go live, it would flash a little light on the map. So anyone anywhere in the world could see that flashing light and say, oh, I wonder what that person in Boston is talking about. So you would hold your phone and you'd see people coming in from India and Turkey and France and California. And as I saw each person come in, I felt like I was disassociating from my body. I was hyperventilating. My heart was racing, but I got through it. And every day I thought, okay, I need some other tool to help me manage my fear. So I gathered this whole ritual of affirmations and deep breathing and power poses and meditation, kicks and punches and jumping jacks and like on. And every other day I would be online Googling how to get over my fear of speaking. And I'd learn, pretend your fear is excitement and don't think of yourself, think of your audience and all these great things. And I'd be all enthused and I would incorporate it into my massive ritual of which ended up being an hour to get on live stream for 5 or 10 minutes. Now, here's the irony. What was I talking about? How to de-stress your life. And here I was so stressed out. But I stayed with it because I thought I'm going to get over the hump. After, a few weeks, I'm going to feel comfortable. That's what everybody told me. So the weeks went by. I got to week 10. I'm about to press broadcast. And I realized my heart is still pounding so hard in my chest. And I thought, this isn't working. What's wrong with me? Why isn't practice bringing me or experience bringing me to a place of confidence? I didn't feel any closer to feeling confident than I did the first week. I didn't feel any closer to feeling calm and relaxed and trusting than I was that first week. So that was when I decided I don't want to manage my fear anymore. I am doing it, but I don't want to spend time doing that. It took too much time. I didn't want to have the fear to have to manage. And that's when I decided I was going to devise a way to get over the fear once and for all. And I did, and it was gone in 5 days.
Whoa, that's crazy. That's crazy. Okay,
I know.
Get into that. I want to find out about this. But I have to say, so there may be tons of people out there that are listening and watching thinking, yep, that's me, like I'm still there, or I remember being there. And then there's people like me who have never been afraid to talk on stage, who've always had the confidence, but then sometimes that becomes a problem because you don't prepare. And so, because you just think, oh, I'm going to be able to do whatever when I'm up there, right? And I just remember, same thing like you said, being in this group when I was in college and being expected to do an intro to a song. And, I just thought I'll get up there and BS my way or whatever, just say whatever, and so I didn't prepare anything, but I was thinking, okay, this is what the song is about. And this is, I could relate it to 7 Deadly Sins or something like that, because it was a Christian college and a religious song I was singing. And I got up there and I said something about, the 7 Deadly Sins. And then I was like, lust and 6 others, because I couldn't think of any of the other ones. And I became known for that. Everybody would be like, yeah, lust and 6 others. And so it's one of those things where it's you have to get over the fear, but then sometimes you also have to get over the fact that you think you know more than you do and you don't need to prepare.
Yes, and actually not being prepared can cause a lot of anxiety because the thing is, winging it sometimes works out great, but it's not a sure thing. We're winging it right now. Most of the speaking we do is completely spontaneous. Very little of the speaking we do is memorized, unless you, let's say, have a keynote, or let's say you have a show and you've memorized your intros. You've done them enough that you know how you like to talk about it. But otherwise, we are always winging it. And that's okay if you are free and you give yourself permission to mess up sometimes. But if you want to feel like there's something specific that you want to impart, that you want to communicate, then even if it's, let's say, improvised to some degree, there's structure to it, the points you want to cover so that you get across the ideas that you want. Now, I sympathize with you because is it 6 or 7 deadly sins?
7 Deadly Sins, yes.
That's a lot to remember. I mean, you really have to practice that. In fact, it reminds me of a talk I gave after COVID. It was the first talk I gave after COVID, and I was talking about how to get comfy on camera. And I decided on 6 things I was going to say to them about it. And then I said to myself, Linda, you know you're not going to remember all 6 things. That's a lot to remember at your age. And then I said, you know what? That's okay. Because if I forget, that gives me the opportunity to show the audience what you do when you forget. And so I welcomed the possibility that I would forget, and I did. I got to number 5. I had no idea what it was. And I said, can't remember what number 5 is, but you know what? It'll probably come back to me, and if it doesn't, I'll email you. And I just left it at that. And then, in fact, it did come back, and I said, oh, you know what? Just remembered number 5, and I just wove it back in. 3 people came up to me after that saying, thank you for modeling what to do when you forget. So it's not a problem for us to forget as long as we're prepared with what to do when we forget. We're prepared for what to do when we stumble over our words or when our mind goes blank.
I love
as
that.
Long,
that's
you
like,
know,
that's a serious tool, right? It's a tool
absolutely.
in your toolbox to prevent you from being so fearful. Okay, what if this did happen? You know, that's one of those things with fear, right? Thinking about, let me just think of all the things, all the what ifs, right? And then, okay, what if that happened? Well, then what? Then what? You know, and then you kind of go through all that in your mind and you're like, okay, I wouldn't die, you know, I'll be okay, right? So I'd love to hear kind of, you said you actually got through this fear in 5 days. How did you do that?
Well, I made a list of all the modality tools that I have because I have a master's degree in expressive arts therapy. You know, I mentioned I have a dance therapy background. And I just was like a self-help geek and had collected a ton of tools from the last century, basically, because I'm that old. And I made a list of all these things. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to apply everything I know. However, I thought before I get into it, let's figure out what is this fear. So I closed my eyes to connect with the fear, and I asked if the fear could talk, what would it say? And what came back was, you're going to be attacked. And I thought, oh, is this like cellular memory, being on the Serengeti, being chased by a saber-toothed tiger? Or have I been attacked? And suddenly I had these memories of my sisters, my 2 older sisters, attacking me every time Mom put me in the center of attention. I was the good girl in the family. Mom said, why can't you girls be more like Linda? Of course, they hated that. As soon as she walked out of the room, they kick me in the shins, say, shut up, call me stupid. And then it was like, duh, of course I don't want to be the center of attention when everyone's listening to me, because I learned it could be dangerous to be the center of attention. All of a sudden, that shifted my brain, the whole way I looked at the fear of speaking. I thought, what if what I'm afraid of is not anything to do with the audience in front of me right now? What if it has everything to do with things that happened in the past? So I started to, what I call, declutter my psychic closet. The psychic closet is kind of like, my background's in Jungian psychology. So the idea of like, what's in the subconscious? What's hanging out in there? The time I was bullied in 7th grade, when everyone said, nobody talked to Linda, feeling on the outside of friend groups and thinking, oh, I'm not the cool kid. Everybody else is cooler. No one's really interested in me. Or Dad saying, I'm sorry, Linda, I'm just not interested in dance or music, you know, whatever, you know, I don't care. It's not a big deal that I missed your solo. You know, it all sounds the same to me. Mm-hmm. All that kind of stuff that kind of erodes at our confidence, that made me feel that I wasn't good enough. I wasn't whatever enough, that people interesting enough, people didn't want to listen to me. I realized I had stuff. I had a lot of stuff. So then what I did is I turned to my list and I applied the things. One of them is a technique called emotional freedom technique, tapping, that people might know, and it's used for PTSD. So I did this technique on all these memories that I had. Then I would stay awake at night. In the middle of the night, I'd be thinking, okay, what else? What else? Comments. Oh yes, my phys ed teacher in college who embarrassed me in class after he came to a dance performance that I did and said, I didn't understand anything you were doing up there. Mm-hmm. And just that feeling of shame that I had. So all of these things that I everything that I could uncover, I then forgave. I forgive you, Mr. So-and-so, for embarrassing me in front of class. I forgive you, Linda, myself, for not knowing how to handle it, for not knowing what to say in that situation. I forgive you, Mom, for not knowing how to be a better parent. I forgive you, sisters, for being jealous of me. So I just kind of like went through all this forgiveness. I did some other kinds of visualization, imagining myself as my younger self and talking to myself, journaled. Of course, I danced. All these things did the trick. And that's why even when I work today, I don't maybe do all that. It was kind of like throwing spaghetti at the wall. But I do recommend a multi-modality approach to healing, because I feel like, why put all of our eggs in one basket? Sometimes something that a simple forgiveness exercise will do will be more impactful than doing EFT, doing journaling. So let's come at it from different ways. Let's come at it from the body. Let's come at it from the emotions. Let's come at it from our intellect. And what we're basically doing when we heal these past experiences is creating a new relationship to them, so that they're no longer sitting inside us kind of in their fossilized way. That, because what I see happening is that we're getting triggered, and we're getting triggered because that memory is inside us in the way it was when the injury happened, and it hasn't changed. So let's change that memory. Let's do what we can to feel a little more compassion, understanding, love, and forgiveness. And when we do that, we let it go.
Yeah, that all makes sense. And so you were trying to like kind of push through, right? You're like, if I just keep,
Oh, yes.
I'm going to be so much better. And so how do you pair that with, because I think you're right, like you can push and push and push, but if you got this underlying stuff, you're not going to get much better. You might get a little bit better. How do you pair it with then still going back to the thing that does fear you have the fear about, and pairing it with using these modalities at the same time? Do you feel like they have to work on the modalities for a while first before they go back to maybe being on stage?
No, actually, like, for instance, like if I'm working with somebody privately, I was working with someone this week who we couldn't find any big traumas. It was really interesting. But there were several things that were going on. One was that they had a bunch of friend groups, but they never felt like they were inside the group. They're always on the periphery. So they always felt like they were the quiet kid on the outside. Nobody's really interested in what they have to say. And then so they were friends with the jocks and with the drama people and the nerds. And then they were in band. And the band teacher had this idea that so let's say this person was playing saxophone, and there were 6 saxes in the band. And they have their chairs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Anyone at any time could challenge number 1, and they'd have a little contest. And if that person, the person who challenged was better, number 1 got kicked out of number 1 seat. And this poor fellow said he was terrified that he was going to be challenged. He didn't want to be competitive. He didn't like that. But he felt like his way of protecting himself was keeping his head down. Don't look at me. I don't want to be too visible, because it could be embarrassing. And this was his way of protecting himself from embarrassment. So what we did was just collected that information. We did some EFT, some creative visualization. I have several different visualizations I like to do, and let it go. And I don't expect that we'll ever have to go back there again. It's done. That's taken care of. So what I want to say to you, Bree, is that I don't believe that we have to do things over and over and over again to clear our stuff. I feel like if we effectively take care of it once, we're done with that. Occasionally with my clients, we have to repeat something. Let's say you had a narcissistic mother or father. You've had many years of dealing with them. You might have so many memories, so many injuries that, yes, maybe we might have to do 2 or possibly even 3, very rarely. Once you take care of these trigger events, they're taken care of. And what's nice about that is that then you can be in the present. And that's how we want to be when we perform. That's where we want to be when we speak, is we just want to be present. So, but there is one other little piece here that's important to recognize is that when I'm talking about past experiences, it could be, messages we got also like, don't draw attention to yourself or don't brag or, don't always have to be in the center of attention. Then those kinds of things, those kind of messages will make us feel like there's something bad about taking up space. And it's going to impact our ability to either perform or to speak, wherever we do, because we don't want to take up people's time. But there's also what we do inside our heads. So it's not just external, it's also internal. And that internal dialogue may very likely be, originated from these external experiences that we had, that we take it on. But still, we have to clean that up too, because if you're saying, I don't really know how to introduce this song very well. People don't want to hear me speak. They just want to hear the music. Or I'm not as good as that person at bantering on the stage. Then it seems like those things are innocuous. But let me say that, and I know I can say this to you, Bree, because it's not going to trigger you. I'll just use you as an example. Bree, you're not as good as that other person, You're not very good at bantering. People don't want to hear what you have to say. Do you hear how harsh that sounds? It's like, Linda, can we end this podcast right now? Would you please go away? Because you're not going to want to hear that voice. And yet we have those kinds of voices going on in our head all the time. And we don't even notice it. We don't even hear it because it's so familiar.
And things we would never say to someone else.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I experienced this a little bit. So I'm a worship director at a church, and sometimes I'm always kind of thinking, even while I'm doing worship, sometimes I'm like, this song's going on too long. Did people really come for the song? Like, some people come for the sermon, some people come for the song, some people, and so I'm always thinking to myself, what about the people that don't really care about the music? They're feeling like this is too long, maybe, and those kind of dialogues are going on in my head because everybody has an opinion about worship music. And some people have given me their opinions, all good and bad. And those things get stuck in my head. And it's awful when you're like on the stage doing it and that's going on in your head.
That's right. It's like the parallel universe.
Yep. And you're like, shut up. Like, I'm trying to play,
Yeah. And in truth, I'm thinking, I know, be quiet. Let me just enjoy it. And it takes away from your experience too, because you're in your head, you're not having the experience that you're trying to create for other people. Here you're trying to, provide an environment that is uplifting, that connects you to your spiritual self, or what, you can say exactly what you're aiming for, but by having these thoughts, you're actually outside of that. And you're not getting to have your experience. I want you to have your experience. I want people to enjoy the limelight. That's why my book is called Delight in the Limelight. I feel like, let us be delighted for those moments and for those experiences that we create for others.
Well, and if you're delighted, then it's going to be clear to the audience. It's going to be infectious. That's the way I see it, right? They're going to be like, oh, they're having so much fun. It makes me feel like I'm having.
Right.
So,
and
I'm curious about like you mentioned earlier about musicians that might have something in their head, like, I don't know how to introduce this song, or I'm not very good at it. Why do you think that musicians, especially songwriters, can like bare their entire soul in a song, but then they can't say anything on stage? They feel super self-conscious.
Well, that's for each person to determine. And that's why I say, let's go back and see what the stuff is. Though one easy way to do it is to think, well, what am I afraid of? Am I afraid of being judged? Oh, when was I judged? When did I feel judged? And then follow that thread back. Maybe it's a family member. Maybe it was just, a stranger's comment to you. Maybe it was something in school. Always connected to something. That's what I have discovered. When we have a fear of speaking somewhere, it's never random. There's always a reason. So the question is, when did we decide it was safer to hide?
That's an interesting thing too. So I know that we talked at the beginning about like being on camera versus being on stage. And you were talking about being on Periscope, which is amazing. Like, I remember the Wild West of Periscope. I wish I would have been really doing that back then, because it was crazy. People built entire fan bases doing that. what are the differences or things that you need to be aware of within yourself as far as like any fear that you might be dealing with, confidence, when it comes to being on camera versus being on?
There are differences and there are also many similarities. I would say for both of them, we want to stay embodied in ourselves. We want to stay inside our experience. And especially as, performers, we are, and I would say this as a speaker too, that we are having an experience that we are inviting others to join in, to witness. So there is some element of, yes, we're speaking to, we're communicating to the audience, but we're also having this experience ourselves that we're allowing ourselves to be seen, we're allowing ourselves to be heard. So that is going to be the same on stage and on camera. I'd say the largest difference between the two is the spatial awareness. Because when you're live in person, you've got people sharing the space with you. And all of you is visible. Whereas when you're on camera, only part of you is visible, and your attention to where the audience is just through this little camera lens. When you look at it, anyone who is looking at you feels your eyes, your view upon them, which is so different than being in a space where if you're looking at one person, everybody else knows you're not looking at them. And so if you want to give them the feeling of that you are recognizing them, you're seeing them, you have to have this spatial awareness of the whole room and that you're bringing your attention to different parts of the room. If that's something that you want to do. As a performer, you can choose whether or not to do that. As a speaker, you probably want to do that more. But even so, that if you are, let's say, if you're up there as a musician and you're telling a story, nobody's going to fault you for looking at your guitar while you're tuning and talking. You don't have to look at the audience. No one's going to fault you for, looking at your bandmate as you're talking, or occasionally just looking at the audience. So there's a lot of leeway, and this is what is, I think, important to remember, that you can create your own parameters of being either on camera or in person, in who and what you're looking at, how you're using your voice, how long you want to talk, how short you want to talk, how you want to play with your voice. But I feel like one of the things that you want to stay aware of is that you do have this opportunity to design the experience that you want. Because if you are no longer triggered by the past, you're no longer absorbed by the thoughts in your head, the question is, how do I want to show up? What do I want this experience to feel like? And this can become the kind of almost like you could say your personal development or a spiritual journey of how you want to be in the world. How do I want to be as a musician? How do I want to be as a person who communicates? So before you go on stage, or before you get on a podcast, or before you do an interview, at the venue where you're going to be performing, that you can think, how do I want to feel? That's number one. How do I want to feel? Do I want to feel relaxed? Do I want to feel energized? Do I want to feel loose and wacky? Do I want to feel strong and, with gravitas, intense? So if you prepave your experience with your intentions, you get to create your experience as you go along. And every time you get on stage, you can say, today I'm going to focus on, just feeling my feet on the floor. Today I'm going to focus on relaxing the muscles in my face. Today I'm going to focus on feeling my shoulders relax. Today I'm going to focus on how I look at people. And so by creating or thinking and playing with how you want to show up, you can create new experiences for yourself and grow in your experience as a speaker and performer.
Yeah, I really, really like that of picking one thing that you focus on each time. I'm going to try that this Sunday and see, feel my foot pushing on the pedal or something like that on the piano.
Yeah, and it's like your little secret intention that nobody else knows about.
But it also can help me stay more present. I can be like, oh, I don't feel my foot on the pedal, like I'm not paying attention. And I
Yes.
think that's good because my mind does tend to wander sometimes and like rein it in. Like, hello, you're like in front of people, you're performing music, and come
Yes.
back to me.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think this is one of the beauties of being in the limelight is that it is an opportunity for us to be more connected with ourselves.
Mm,
I used to feel like when I know that the attention is on me, that's a lot of energy and it helps me to focus in. And I remember like at the Periscope chapter of my life, after I got over the fear of speaking, I had a very busy day. I was doing lots of errands and I needed to get back by 4 o'clock because I needed the light. I didn't have any special light, so I needed the natural light. And I remember pulling in the car to the garage and I set up my camera on the tripod and I said, "Hey guys, I just want to say how grateful I am to get to be on camera because after a hectic day, I can turn this thing on and just relax." And I thought, wow, that's a really interesting thought that finally I can relax. And then I wondered, why is that? And it's because suddenly, without any of that stuff, triggering me, without any of those thoughts, having the attention brought me into the present moment. And what I like to think about is how can we go even deeper in ourselves, not in spite of the audience, but because of the audience.
mm,
How can we utilize this opportunity where we are in the limelight to help let that attention bring us more deeply into ourselves?
I really like that, especially because, when you're on Periscope or you're on stage or whatever, you're not having to do the million other things of life. You're not having to think
Exactly.
about, I need to pick up the dog from the groomer and go, get the laundry done and all that stuff. Like you have to be present because you're presenting, you're in the limelight. And that is actually kind of like a relaxing gift.
It's true. It's like there's no place to go, no place to be except here now. As long as you are open and free and comfortable being there.
Mm,
Yeah.
that's awesome. I love that framing for sure.
I want to share something just because it may be very relevant. One of my traumas in my musical career was that I found myself through the 40 years I performed with my group that I was losing confidence in my singing. And my voice started to become unsteady, it was wobbly, and then people started to notice and comment about it and my director kept saying, "I want you to hold that note steady." And I was thinking, I can't do it. And the whole time that I was like losing my confidence, I was taking weekly singing lessons. And I've taken with a number of wonderful singing instructors. But somehow I was still, more and more afraid to hit those high notes. I was more and more afraid to like do a solo. And when I came around to writing my book, I realized, Linda, your singing fear is like your speaking fear. And you have not addressed it in the same way that you're telling other people to address their speaking fear. So I made a pact with myself that by the time I finished writing my book, I would have followed all of my directives in the book to get over my fear of speaking. And of course, it didn't take that long because once I sat down, I said, okay, where's my stuff? Where did I feel criticized? Who am I afraid to sing around because I'm afraid of being judged? And I did all the things that I said that we should do to clear our fear of speaking, to clear my stuff around singing. And it's interesting because since the pandemic, I left the group. So I haven't been in a performing position anymore. So I don't have any place to say, "Oh yeah, I'm done now." Or it worked. I don't have the evidence except that I know that I love singing now in a way that I hadn't for years. And it was interesting that until I cleared my stuff around my singing anxiety, I felt like I couldn't really learn the skills that my teachers were trying to teach me.
Mm,
It was like I was because I was carrying that anxiety all the time. It's like even in my lessons, I was just tight inside on an energetic and emotional level, like, oh my God, is this going to be right? Am I going to be good enough? And you can't really enjoy singing. You can't enjoy playing when you have that level of tension, emotional and physical tension inside.
No, you really can't.
You can't. You just can't. And I just realized I can't even learn new skills. Since I got over, now I still take vocal lessons even though I'm not performing. And it's wonderful to feel like, oh, I'm getting better at this. I'm feeling, I didn't even wasn't even thinking about technique when I just sang that right now. I just sang it and I just loved singing it. So I feel like I am finally enjoying my singing voice in a way that I hadn't for decades.
And I think that is the goal, right? It's being able to perform without thinking about technique constantly. And that's true for voice, and that's true for thinking about having to work through, because I've had people on the podcast talking about like things you can do before you go on stage to like calm yourself down and work through your fears and, and quell the anxiety and all that. And those may be necessary still for a while, but if you can get rid of this that's underlying, then you might not need those other things, or will need them less.
Yes, or I would say you would need them for another purpose. And the other purpose would be to put yourself in the position to get in the zone, to have a kind of peak experience, a deep experience for yourself, to bring the best of your intention to the experience. So that it's not necessarily to quell the fear, because hopefully the fear wouldn't be there if you cleared your stuff away. But yes, you still want to remember that I want to be heartfelt, or you want to remind yourself of the place the energy that you want to bring, so that when you step out on stage or step up to the mic, you are already in that river, you're already in that flow. And you can surrender yourself to it. You can let yourself be or even just like remind yourself, I'm the vehicle, and let, that energy come through you.
I love that. I love that idea and the vehicle. So I would love to have you share a little bit about your book and where people can find it. Because I think whether it's more about speaking, I think all of us musicians, we do need to do speaking. Like if we're going to be successful, we really need to incorporate banter and stories and all of that. But I think it can be useful for musicians specifically as well.
So the book is Delight in the Limelight, Delight in the Limelight. You can get it anywhere online. You can order it from your library. You can ask your local bookstore to order it, however you like to buy books. And it is a guide to help you transform whatever anxiety or dread that you have, to turn it into enjoying the speaking that you do instead.
That's awesome.
And hopefully, or if it's a dread of performing, it's the performing that you do. Because I do feel like even though I had in mind speaking, I'm also aware, and I know, and I've worked with performers to get over their any aspect of anxiety that they have, and it's the same process.
Yeah, don't we all just want to delight in the limelight? For sure.
We all, yes.
Be in the limelight, we better delight in it.
That's right. Life is too short to do it any other way.
Absolutely. Cool. And can they connect with you anywhere online?
Oh, yes. Linda Ugelow, Ugelow. You'll find me on TikTok. You can find my website or LinkedIn, Facebook. I'm really not that much on Instagram. You'll see my stuff there, but I don't hang out there very much.
Well, thank you so much, Linda. This has been a great conversation, as I knew it would be, being a fellow speaker, a fellow podcaster, a fellow musician, so much in common. And I know that everything we talked about today is going to be super useful to everyone.
Thanks for having me on, Bree.
Thanks for listening to the Profitable Musician Show. I would love to know your takeaways and aha moments from this episode. Leave me a comment over at profitablemusician.com so I can bring you more of the information, interviews, and resources that you love. Thanks to Rondi Fay, one of my Academy members, for providing the music for our podcast. You can check her out at rondifay.com. That's RANDIFAY.com. Just remember, knowledge is power, but without implementation, it is useless. And inspiration without action is merely entertainment. But I know you're not just a dreamer, you are a doer. And I promise I'll be here every week to support you and remind you that you can be a profitable musician.